it's of less importance, but still useful, and that's in the nature of magnetism as inertia, and how basically magnetism occurs in any atomic lattice where the ratio of the distance between the atoms' centers divided by the radius to the outermost unfilled shell of those atoms is a ratio of about 2.8 to 3.2 to 1. And the thing will exhibit magnetic behavior. And that's a spacing thing, so that you can basically compress or change the lattice of any mass and make it magnetic if you can get that ratio of spacing so that the outermost unfilled shell of one atom shares its outer shell with the other atom in kind of a dumbbell kind of spinning relationship. And as these line up, line after line after line, it forms a tremendous accelerator for those electrons in the outer shell. And the more of them you get, of course, the stronger the field effect is in that frequency range. But that's another issue. The gravity one is the next paper to come, and previews of it are there in the images I've got on that images for the show today. Major points in that will be that gravity, you do not have gravitational constants without spin. You'll have the spin of the atoms, or you'll have the spin of planets around a star, and these stars themselves, the star systems, their total spin is like an atom compared to the galaxy. And there's a containment field that contains the stars of the galaxy, and I suspect there's probably a galactic containment thing that contains galaxies in an order. But no gravitational constant exists in anything without spin about an axis. And that's one of the major things that's going to be shown. And the other is that there is a periodic inversion at the core of any gravitational reaction, and that you can form shells that are hollow and with periodic openings at the poles as the thing unwinds, and that everything is expanding in the universe, even down to stars, planets, galaxies, atoms. As they age, they expand in diameter until at some point in the far distant future, the Dirac sea is calm again, and nothing exists except the sea. No atoms, nothing.
Thank you very much for that and everything you do, Stan. This is a really important information for humanity, in my opinion.
Well, I hope that what I've done is, it's crude. I mean, it's not in matrix algebra or anything complex. But by using the illustrations, the animations, and the equations, the basic equations, what I'm trying to do is give that as a tool to the young engineers, mathematicians, and physicists now coming up in the world with an open mind and say, look, take this as a building block, refine it, add to it, and go for it. But this is going to allow them to do a lot more, explain a lot more things that relativity could not. Certain things could be solved in relativity, but could not be brought back out into the real world through the mathematical gateway. And that's why we know that relativity had its problems.
Mulder, you have a question for Stan.
Yes, Stan. Wanted to ask you, I've seen some fascinating videos of permanent magnet motors on YouTube, which appear to actually show perpetual motion without any sort of electric current being involved. Do you think that such a thing is possible, or are these videos just hoaxes?
I don't know that they're hoaxes, but they might be misinterpreted. The idea of perpetual motion is in itself not correct, because even though you can have sustained motion for a long period of time, the universe is, at this point anyway, unwinding. Everything is expanding and getting larger diameter and slowing down, and energy is being redistributed through the Dirac sea, or the ether space. So in its final analysis, all relative motion will eventually become equal and stop, and there will be nothingness, nihilo. So for a magnet motor that appears to just keep running and running and running, what may be happening there, and I've studied a number of these, is that small amounts of energy are being strip mined out of the lattice of the magnetic of the magnets. so that energy is actually being converted from a nuclear source in a controlled harmonic manner, which allows the spin to continue. It's not free energy. It's not perpetual motion, because the atoms will eventually lose enough energy that they'll collapse the magnetic field, or it won't be magnetic any longer, and the thing will stop. But it may be 100 years or 1,000 years before that happens. They need, if they're going to do something like that, they need to get it so that they can extract more energy than is needed to keep the wheel moving, so that you can power your house and this kind of stuff. And that is possible. Whether these guys with their videos have got the answer yet, I don't think so. But again, I've not built or tested the models myself, and if I were running my house, I'd tell you. But I just think that we need to know where the energy is coming from that they're using to keep these things spinning. I've played with a number of these things too, and as I say, I think that it is coming from a nuclear source, and there's so much energy confined in the fluid of space itself and in the atoms, in spin, that just taking a minuscule part of it would keep those things spinning for many generations.
Okay, thank you. The second question for you. I noticed recently when I was at Costco that they were selling these bladeless fans. And they were these circular structures, and the air just flowed around the circle. And I assume what I was seeing was some sort of implementation of electromagnetic propulsion on the air, and that this was probably a similar principle to some of the early anti-gravitational, or at least earthbound atmospheric anti-gravitational principles that you were talking about. Does that sound correct to you?
Well, no. Look, I looked at some of those. You're talking about the Dyson air multiplier, and they have a cutaway of it showing there is a little fan down inside of it that shoves the air out through that hoop. So they do have a circular motion device down in the base of it that imparts motion to the air, at least in the manuals that I've viewed on his website. But yeah, I was impressed with it, but it's still like a normal fan. There's nothing magic about it. It's just the way that it's using airflow in a most efficient way, and Dyson is really good at this. I mean, my hat's off to the guy. He's played with vortices to make his vacuum cleaners, and people don't realize what a magnificent thing he's done there. But the flow of air in that hoop, that ring fan, that bladeless fan, is the beginning of a way that you can make a flying saucer, not anti-gravity, but just a toroidally driven entrainment flying saucer. I've designed a number of these, and plus the marine versions, and they all have that kind of hoop shape to the water or to the air, and they pulse the air out ahead of the craft or the water out ahead of the submarine and curl it back into the intakes, and so that the energy stores in a circulating field, which allows you to make much more efficient use of your power. I mean, go like many times where your normal fuel would take you in those two environments by using what he's got in that bladeless fan. It's a really good example of what I try to teach people.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right.
Okay, Stan, we've only got a few questions left. Ong Puppy, what's your question?
Well, Stan, a while back, a hacker had infiltrated certain military installations and recovered some information regarding UFOs and what he termed non-terrestrial officers. In my mind, that led me to think that they may have succeeded in disrupting one of these off-Terra gates. Do you see that as a possibility, that there are such gates being activated today, or what do you think?
Well, look, I can guess and say from what I've read in the old writings that such gates or gateways have existed, do exist, and that beings from the parallel universes are being gated in here at the moment. And I think the ones that are being gated primarily are the resistance or the challengers to the authority of the existence, the established order of God. And so it says in the last days of this age that we cast down the earth from the upper levels. So those gateways, I think, are being used that way, but I don't think we're being allowed to gate back. I think it's one way at the moment, and I have tried to build a toroidal gate in the past and found that a strange thing happened in the lab when I did it. it was donuts, these kind of donut wound coils, and I was pulsing DC through. And I had it sitting on the workbench in front of me, and as I hit the current to it at one of the make breaks that I did, the light from everything in the room in front of me, from the table, from the walls, it was as though everything was painted on saran wrap and was being sucked into the center of this coil for a fraction of a second, and I was nauseous. I felt like I was rolling upside down just for a fraction of a second, and then it stopped working, and I could never get it to work again. So I think that such a thing is possible using toroidal coils for a gate, but I don't know how to control it.
Thank you for that. You kind of answered the follow-up on there, but what I wanted to find out, too, speaking before in an interview, you had spoke of the secret of secrets and the return of the Sumerian. Can you elaborate?
The secret of secrets. Return of the Sumerian. I don't follow that. When did I say that?
Well, this was an interview, I think in 2005. You were speaking of someone through the Pentagon that spoke to you about the secret of secret and the return of Sumerian gods.
Oh, Linda Moulton was talking about that, the return of the Sumerian gods in the Pentagon. This may be the fallen ones being cast down to earth, like, were the progenitors of the legend of Atlantis. They were sons of God that were put on earth and then violated the rules and were punished, etc., etc. Atlantis sank or was sunk. The return of these little g gods, super beings and super technology beings, it is forecast in the Bible, and certainly the Sumerian texts do relate to these super beings back then, being coming to the planet or being put on the planet, whichever way you choose. So what we're seeing now is what I expected from reading the ancient languages, and what I've seen inside the organization is that the bad guys are coming here in great number, and they're going to set up a deception so that the little grays become the real bad guys, when in essence both the little grays and the humanoids are the bad guys, the first lot. And these are the quote-unquote Sumerian-type gods that they spoke of in the old writings, and in India, in the legends in India as well. They're just, I hear snippets of things from people that fit into the whole concept that reinforce it, and these are from either military or UFO investigator types. And then from what I translate or read of other people's translations as well of the ancient documents, all these things seem to support that same central theme.
Thank you very much, Stan.
You bet.
Stan, in summarizing the hidden technology section, we've discussed a lot already. Obviously, measurements and theories are only good if you can, you're looking at a constant field. Basically, as I've heard, the electronic spin resonance has been changing since the 1960s. Even carbon-14 dating might be changing. Its half-life maybe because of the sun. How have you taken that into account, and how hard would it be? Maybe there'd be a set of new equations after the sun does its expansion theory in 2014. So have you thought about that?
Well, that's kind of what I was indicating when I was saying that I've laid the groundwork with the Gemstone 1 and what you'll see in Gemstone 2 paper of the way spin and exchange of energy leads toward final entropy until everything is at the same level. There will be no energy level differences. So, sure, the electron spin resonance changes. Doesn't surprise me at all. I wasn't aware that it had changed, but if that's the case, it just supports what I'm telling you, is that everything is expanding, and it probably at various rates because of the structure of our solar system versus another one, or whatever the energy density at the time. But they all follow that expansion and entropy curve. It's not isotropy where it's